our Bills draft special, and the Bills just selected their 4th round pick, number 128 overall, and it is wide receiver Gabriel Davis out of UCF. I'm Maddy Glab, and I'm joined by Bills insider Chris Brown. And wide receiver was a position that we were talking about that the Bills could target in rounds 4 and 5 just because of what was available on the board. And you look at this receiver, 6'2", 216, ran a 4.54. He had 72 receptions in 2019 for 1,200 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. I like his size, and I like what he could do on this Bills offense. Chris, what stood out to you about Gabriel Davis?
Yeah, if you watch tape of this guy, the thing that stands out about him is he's deceptive as a route runner. This guy is not a burner. I mean, you gave his 40 time, 4.54, but his first step off the line and his releases are pretty good. The thing that stood out to me when I watched him on tape was he really sells those double move routes. And so he does those double moves. He leaves DBs in the dust, just has a good way of shifting his weight, selling a fake, and getting separation that way. And when he's in contested situations one-on-one, he's got that my ball mentality and usually comes down with the football. So this is a player who, even though he's 6'2", he's not a giant. He plays bigger than that just because he's really good at catching balls outside his body radius. So that's going to be a good thing for Josh Allen. If the ball isn't exactly 100% on the money, this is a player that's still going to make a play for you.
He averaged 16.1 yards per reception during his time at UCF. And UCF, not the biggest college, but one thing I like about him playing in UCF is he flourished in a big offense that had big play opportunity. Another thing about UCF and him being from Florida, plenty of Florida guys on this roster, and I was reading an article that actually said he trained with running back Zach Moss in Southern California before being drafted by the Bills. Crazy to think about all these connections that these new players have to this roster already.
Yeah, it's a small world, right? But this is a guy that played the X-receiver position for Central Florida. He was their number one target. The thing that encourages me is this is a guy who got better and better as his college career went along. You can even see that just by looking at his statistics from year to year to year, 27, 53, 72 receptions. He grew into a true number one role and led the team in receiving last year. So I think it's a player that's going to have time to grow here in Buffalo. He doesn't have to come right on the field right away and put up monster production. I think that's good because this is a guy who I think may have to tighten up his footwork just a little bit. And as I said, he's got build-up speed, not straight fire off the line speed. So I think he's a guy that is going to have to hone his footwork, his release, getting off of press, those kinds of techniques to become a more and more polished receiver as a pro.
That build-up speed, his ability to be physical in the game, you look at what he can provide as a blocker too, especially in the run game. And you talk about blocking as well in the specialties. This is somebody who could be used in quite a few roles based off of what he can do, right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has the physical ability to block in the run game, and we know that that's important in Brian Daboll's offensive scheme. The thing that he's just got to be a little careful of is he did get a little grabby at times in college. He drew some flags that negated some big plays in the run game for Central Florida. So he's just got to keep his hands inside, work on that technique, with receivers coach Chad Hall, so he can be a more effective blocker because at 6'2", 216, he's got the physical stature to do it. Now he's just got to really perfect the technique of executing and not getting called for holding penalties.
He had 8 games of 100 or more receiving yards, which tied for 9th most in program history at UCF. And Chris, I was looking at his bio, and it looked like his mother, who's a single mother, played a big emphasis in his life and in his football career. When he was little, I read that he didn't pay attention too much during practices, and his mom said, you know what, I'm not going to pay for this if you're not going to give it your all. And he was able to turn around, put his all into football. His brother also played at UCF. His younger brother was a tight end at UCF, so keeping it in the family there is cool as well.
Right, and I mean, hey, single moms, they got to play the role of both parents, and it's clear to me that Gabriel and his brother obviously respect all the time and effort that their mom put in, not only working to make a living and put food on the table, but to serve both parental roles for two boys that end up being pretty accomplished in the game of football. So it's nice to see kids like this kind of give props to their parents, especially when there's only one taking care of them. So nice to know that, it's a guy that respects the parental figure in his house to the nth degree.
And Chris, when we look at who the Bills have taken so far, an edge rusher, a running back, and a wide receiver, how do you start to see this roster come together with those free agent additions?
Well, I mean, you look at what they've added, and it was primarily on the defensive side of the ball, although some offensive additions came later in the game here. Now you have a wide receiver in the fold for some depth at that position. I still think offensive tackle is something they could look at, or guard. I don't think you could rule that out, although more of their free agent additions came at the guard/center position. So I think if you can get an offensive tackle that you think is a developmental type prospect that could help you more maybe in 2021, 2022, maybe you look at that. And then I still believe cornerback is a position they can address. We've seen a couple go off the board, including one of my guys that was top 5 in Reggie Robinson, the Tulsa corner. He came off the board. So there's still some value at that position. So if they can maybe grab one of those guys, again, a long range type of player, not somebody that has to come on the field and perform for them here in 2020, but maybe someone who is put in the pipeline and maybe as early as 2021, if they progress and advance their game, has a shot at maybe pushing for a starting job.
And one thing we heard about Brandon Beane talk about on his conference call last night with the media was how his mindset changes in rounds 4 through 7. Instead of thinking about grabbing a guy with starting potential right off the bat, you think about how can this player earn a jersey on this team? How can he add value and depth into the room? How does that play into how they're looking at the board today?
It's all special teams now. If you're drafting a player that you think can make your 53-man roster, in rounds 5, 6, and 7, the odds are long, especially with the way this roster has been put together the last couple of years, that they're going to be a starting player. So you say, okay, if he's not going to be a starting player as a rookie, we have to draft somebody that's going to be able to help us in some way, shape, or form. And that usually becomes special teams. So if there's somebody with a special teams background or special teams experience, on offense or defense, whether it's a corner who has return ability or a receiver who's been a gunner, something like that, or a linebacker that can really run but needs development on the defensive side of the ball, but he can run 40 yards, cover some ground, and make some plays on special teams. That's a kid you take a chance on at this point in the draft.
All right, we're 3 picks in, and before we wrap this up, Chris, I got to ask you, how are you liking these selections so far?
I'm pretty happy in terms of the positions that have been addressed to this point. I think they wanted to add some size at the receiver position. So to finally see that, I'm encouraged by that. I think they'll have all bases covered if they can address cornerback here before the day is done. But they addressed a lot of the need positions. So I'm pretty happy, all things considered.
All right, we're going to hop off here. Still a few rounds left, 5, 6, and 7. The Bills have selections in each of those rounds. Stick with us here because we'll be on breaking down those picks. So come right back here. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys soon.
Go Bills.